Good day, goeiedag, fellow South Africans. Well, our friends at Nedbank, who have said if the government expropriates your land, you still owe the debt, and to you, have now just appeared again in Parliament. And I'm going to verbalize what you can see in the video that follows, and you can understand what charlatans these bankers are, okay? How they're playing both sides of the ledger, you know. All right, expropriate the land, we'll just go and keep on charging them for their loans, even though they don't have the land anymore. But we got to say that if you do that, the country is, excuse my language, the country is fucked, okay? So, this is word for word that you'll hear this guy from Nedbank say in the Parliament, the South African Parliament. Okay. He says, and I'm going to emphasize certain parts, which he doesn't. Section 25 of the Constitution places restrictions and oversight on the state to expropriate private property. It recognizes the importance to own private property and to be protected against the arbitrary deprivation thereof as a fundamental right. It is one of the pillars of our legal and economic system. As a result, it underpins much of the safety and soundness of our financial system. Get that? Private property ownership underpins the soundness of our financial system. Okay. He goes on to say, the right to own property is, however, not absolute, and the state is entitled to expropriate property as long as it is in the terms of general application for a public purpose or in the public interest, and subject to a just and equitable compensation with the important provision of judicial oversight. Okay, so compensation, okay? Now, remember, this is the bank that's been saying, oh, if the government takes your property away without compensation, we're still going to force you to pay your loan. And now they're saying, hey, okay, let me repeat that. The right to own property is, however, not absolute, and the state is entitled to expropriate property as long as it is in the terms of general application for a public purpose or in the public interest and subject to a just and equitable compensation with the important provision of judicial oversight. This is the Nedbank guy talking. You'll hear him in a second. These are his words. In our opinion, the Constitution should therefore not be used as a scapegoat for the real reason behind progress in land reform. As the chief executive of one of our biggest banks, this is the guy who runs the Nedbank, you'll see in a second, understand my obligations not only to the 8 million clients who entrust to protect their hard-earned savings, but also to the safety and soundness of our entire financial system and economy. Now, I've got to tell you that the major shareholder in Nedbank is the Old Mutual. Okay, they own something like 53 or 54% of the bank. I would love to know who owns the Old Mutual. And I bet if you had a look, you'd find it goes back to friggin' Wall Street. Okay? Betcha. Okay. He goes on to say, the stability of the banking system is an extremely valuable national asset which contributes to the assessment of our country's investment ranking. It lowers borrowing costs and ensures funding availability for government, companies, and individuals alike. Okay, well, we all know that. This is particularly important in South Africa, where we have a current account and fiscal deficit. China, hello. That means we spend more than we earn and we import more than we export, and as a result, we rely on external borrowings to balance the books of our country. That's what's going on in South Africa right now. It's going down the tubes fast. And this whole land thing is a total smokescreen. Okay, he continues to say, as a commercial bank, we are a key role player in funding the economy, and any material negative impact on property prices would adversely impact confidence in the banking system. What the hell is expropriation with land without compensation going to do to that kind of confidence? And he goes on to say, not only that, but it could trigger a classical banking crisis, starting with the land bank. Oh, guess why the land bank? And smaller banks, and then to bigger banks, like his bank, Nedbank, with significantly negative knock-on effects to the entire South African economy. And I'll leave you with this last statement. He says a lot more in the video that follows, but these are the key things he says. And this one is the elephant in the room. Here we go. Every property that is expropriated without compensation, every property, is likely to result in a direct impairment to that loan on the balance sheet of the lending bank, even if that loan remains technically, legally due and payable. Do you see what this guy is doing? He's like on both sides of the line. You know, he's sort of kind of saying, "Hey, I'm the good guy. You know, I support you in expropriating land without compensation." And on the side, he's saying, "Hey guys, you do that, you know, you're going to fuck up our economy, but don't worry about it. You know, you'll just fuck yourselves up." And that's the game the banks play. They really don't give a damn about people. Just know that. Okay, without any further ado, here is Mr. Nedbank talking in the South African Parliament. Okay. If you're white and South African, my advice to you is to take every bloody cent out of Nedbank and put it either in another bank or into gold Kruger rands, because the rand is going south big time. Okay, so your first priority is to secure the value of your assets and get the hell out of the rand, because it's going south. And talking about south, don't forget to subscribe, because I put regular videos up here, and we have a live stream every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. Okay, take care guys. See you then.
In this context, property and land specifically as a capital asset and as the basis of security is a key enabler of this role of a bank. It provides the security for many loans that we make, thereby safeguarding the country's savings and deposits and ensuring the safety and soundness of our financial system. As South Africans, we believe we have a constitutional duty to recognize and redress the injustices and inequalities of our past, while simultaneously working to build a society that is based on the rule of law and aims to improve the quality of life for all our citizens. These injustices and inequalities are apparent in all parts of the economy and in land ownership, which reflect our history of conflict, colonialism, segregation, and apartheid. As a result, it's clear to us that land distribution and ownership is skewed along racial lines. Therefore, as a leading commercial bank and a partner in society, we recognize the national imperative of changing these skewed and unequal patterns of ownership affecting land reform in a way that is constitutionally based, orderly, pragmatic, and sustainable, which contributes to and unlocks higher and more inclusive economic growth, which safeguards food security and does not create systemic risk to the financial sector and, as a consequence, damage the economy. Whatever the recommendations and conclusions that this Honourable Committee may arrive at, including prospective legislation interventions and amendments, Nedbank would want to work with the state to make sure that effective, sustainable and an economically beneficial model and program of land reform is implementable. Nedbank believes that the Constitution already strikes a careful and well-considered balance between the need to protect ownership and the need to ensure land reform and address the inequalities caused by our history. In our opinion, the Constitution has to date not been an impediment to the lack of progress on land reform. In our opinion, there is no deficit in the legal powers provided to the state by the Constitution and in existing legislation to expropriate land for land reform purposes. However, they have not been adequately promoted or enforced. Section 25 of the Constitution places restrictions and oversight on the ability of the state to expropriate private property. It recognizes the importance of the right to own property and to be protected against the arbitrary deprivation thereof. As a fundamental right, it is one of the pillars of our legal and economic system. As a result, it underpins much of the safety and soundness of our financial systems. The right to own property is not, however, absolute, and the state is entitled to expropriate property provided it is in terms of a law of general application for a public purpose or in the public interests, and subject to a just and equitable compensation with the important protection of judicial oversight. In our opinion, the Constitution should therefore not be used as a scapegoat for the real reason for our lack of sufficient progress on land reform. As the chief executive of one of our big banks, I certainly understand my obligations, not only to the 8 million clients who entrust us to protect their hard-earned savings, but also to the safety and soundness of our entire financial system and economy. The stability of the banking sector is an extremely valuable national asset, which contributes to the assessment of our country's investment ranking. It lowers borrowing costs and ensures funding availability for government, companies, and individuals alike. This is particularly important in South Africa, where we have a fiscal and current account deficit. That means we spend more than we earn, and we import more than we export. And as a result, we are reliant on external borrowings to balance the books of our country. As a commercial bank, we're a key role player in funding the economy, and any material negative impact on property prices would adversely impact confidence in the banking system and could trigger a classical banking crisis, starting, unfortunately, with the smaller banks and the land bank, and possibly migrating to bigger banks, with significant negative knock-on effects to the economy. Every bonded property that is expropriated without compensation is likely to result in a direct impairment to that loan on the balance sheet of the lending bank, even if such loans do remain technically legally due and payable. In addition, municipalities would be impacted in terms of rates and taxes. So for indicative purposes, and we've heard some numbers earlier, for Nedbank, an assumed expropriation of 10% of Nedbank's 153 billion rand residential mortgage book would result in a direct impairment charge of a minimum of 15 billion rand. As Nedbank only has 14.5% market share in residential mortgages, impacts for our peers would be larger than this. Our exposure to commercial property is 162 billion rand, and our exposure to agriculture 17 billion. Banking crises everywhere in the world start on the asset side of the balance sheet. As a bank, we'd be left with few options in order to protect our capital and our depositors. These include possibly shrinking our balance sheets, constraining credit to other sectors of the economy, or in extreme circumstances, requiring government intervention. The latter, as we have seen around the world, coming at a cost to taxpayers to protect depositors. Maintaining confidence in the banking system is absolutely imperative for depositors to feel that their money is safe. This directly affects the level of the currency, our sovereign debt ratings, and the value of investments held by pension funds, asset managers, and consequently every ordinary South African, including you and I. Global data shows us that the recovery from such crises are painful and costly and can be characterized by recession, higher unemployment, and spiraling public debt. We've seen an example of this in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. So as an aside, given the importance of this parliamentary process, I have just returned early from our international investor roadshows to make this presentation. I can assure you that the uncertainty in the investor community in respect of the outcome of this constitutional review process is already negatively impacting investor perceptions and investment in our country. The topic of expropriation without compensation and the lack of clarity as to exactly what this could mean was raised in every single investor meeting. Hence the importance for us to provide clarity and certainty as quickly as possible. In conclusion, Nedbank is certainly committed to working together with fellow South Africans to support an orderly process of ongoing land reform. And we propose a plan of concrete and considered steps along the following lines, which requires both the state and the private sector to work together. So to be clear, in our opinion, this does not require constitutional amendments. Firstly, we need a comprehensive and well-resourced model for land reform. And this needs to be predicated on actions to more effectively use existing instruments and powers of land reform so that we don't further delay land reform in our country. Secondly, this requires legislative, regulatory and administrative frameworks with parliamentary and judicial oversight. And thirdly, the state working with the private sector to explore opportunities to provide improved and more holistic support for beneficiaries. We'd like to thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much to Nedbank, members, Honorable Korenov, Honorable Kata, Honorable Telezi, right, Honorable Mene, Honorable Paulsen, Honorable Kodi, Honorable Mutapo, and Honorable Swart. Ari.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much for the presentation from Nedbank. There is a debate, a pro and a con debate with regard whether there should be title deeds or not. Now, some people say, for a layman, if your property are bonded, the bank will take it, whether it's true or not. Some people will say, as soon as the title deed is transferred from the municipality to the title deed, to the new title deed holder, that property will be sold because of other household debt. So, it is a debate. Now, what I want to ask you, if there is a caveat against that title deed, to say that in the first 10 years, you cannot sell this property, or if you sell it, the state will have, or the municipality will have, in this instance, if it's urban land, will have a right of first refusal. So you must sell it back to the state. So can I ask you, will that lower the value of the bank security if there's caveats in like that?
Kaja.
Thank you, Chairperson. Would you say that the positive impacts currently proffered by our government, whether it outweighs the negative impact from the bank's point of view? And then, just unfortunately, earlier on, my question wasn't really answered, so I'm going to ask it to Nedbank. What will the effect of expropriation without compensation be on your 8 million clients, their salaries, their savings that they are entrusting you with? Thank you.
Honorable Telezi.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks for the presentation. My question is very simple. I've heard that Nedbank and also the Banking Association has been speaking a lot with regards to the risk, the potential risk actually that they think if we go this sort of amending constitution will be there. And also, don't they think that already as a country we're in a risk where the majority of our people, in particular the blacks, are not working. As a result, they rely on the state in terms of the social grants, and their health is dependent on the state in terms of public hospitals and all that. And as a business, when they consider this as having a potential risk, I believe they believe so much in taking a risk as a business. Why, in this regard, they actually warn the state if they consider this as a risk, and the state is convinced rather that this process won't interfere and won't actually pose any risk in this regard. Thank you.
Honorable Mene.
Menteche. Nedbank, you've put it quite correctly at the beginning that there's a skewed distribution of land in South Africa. And that leaves us with 90% of wealth in the hands of minority, which a majority of them is just white people. And the rest of the people that actually do all the things which the previous Busa was talking about, to be empowered and everything else, is black people that work the land. So if we get to the end of this whole process we are doing, and land is expropriated without compensation, as Nedbank, are you willing to come on board and work with government to assist in the process of ensuring that land is no longer a commodity, but everything else that we can do on top of the land, like building the structures, agriculture, and building factories and everything else, is a reality? Will you be able to come on board? And then secondly, you speak of the road shows or business shows you were doing abroad, but all of them, they all fail to look into other countries where the same system has been applied, like Singapore and China. And the systems there haven't failed. Nothing has failed. They invest this scare and threats and everything else that investments are going to run away and everything. They haven't run away anywhere else. They are still there. And this system is there. It's implemented. It's working. It's successful. So why do they always put upfront that is our investment safe? What is this uncertainty? Because where this system has worked, no one left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. On slide 6, point 2, you speak about legislative and regulatory certainty, and also including an enabling policy. Yet policies have benefited business, and yet what sort of investment has this brought to the country, even though there's been an enabling policy? And then the other question is, in terms of Nedbank's exposure, if we do expropriate land without compensation, and if we were to pass this amendment, if we were to amend this policy, or this Section 25, would Nedbank commit to working with government to avoid that classical banking crisis that you speak of? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. I will also